Welcome to The Explainer. Look, if you've spent literally any time in the online fitness or biohacking spaces lately, you've definitely seen the massive viral trend around peptides, specifically a compound called BPC-157. Influencers are hyping this stuff up to the moon, treating it like a magical injection that can heal those nagging injuries and help you get absolutely shredded. But we've got to ask, is there actual hard science backing this up, or are we just looking at another crazy internet trend? Let's find out.
Okay, let's dive straight into this. Because honestly, it is completely understandable why this is so popular right now. We all want a quick fix. If you've been battling a stubborn rotator cuff or a bad knee for months, the idea that a simple, quick injection could just fix the whole shebang, well, that sounds incredible. But we need to ask the hard questions here. Is this heavily promoted compound an actual medical miracle, or is it just incredibly dangerous, totally unregulated hype? To figure that out, we first need to quickly ground ourselves in what exactly a peptide even is. So just a super quick refresher, peptides are basically just small pieces of proteins. They're specific sequences of amino acids that are coded by your own DNA. And peptides themselves aren't bad at all. Your body naturally uses thousands of them every single day. Proven ones like insulin do the heavy lifting of regulating our blood sugar, and collagen peptides are widely used for joint health. So at their core, they're essentially just tiny biological messengers doing really important work in your system. Right, which brings us to the star of today's show. BPC actually stands for Body Protective Compound. And specifically, BPC-157 is a 15 amino acid segment of this compound that, believe it or not, is found naturally in human stomach acid. Its original biological purpose is thought to be protecting our delicate intestinal lining from the incredibly harsh, highly acidic conditions inside our guts. It's basically a localized protector for your stomach.
So, how exactly did a stomach acid compound morph into the ultimate gym bro obsession? Well, the history is actually pretty fascinating. It started way back in the early 1990s in Croatia. Researchers identified it and started looking into its potential for treating inflammatory bowel diseases and healing stomach ulcers. Over the next 20 years or so, that research shifted into laboratories, leaning heavily on testing in rats and mice. Fast forward to today, and that obscure stomach ulcer research has absolutely exploded like wildfire into the modern biohacking and wellness sphere.
Now, to be completely fair to BPC-157, the science in the lab, it's honestly pretty incredible. When we look at in vitro testing, meaning, in a petri dish outside the body, and in animal studies, it genuinely does some phenomenal things. It shows a real ability to repair tissues like tendons and ligaments. It helps with angiogenesis, which is the creation of new blood vessels that are absolutely crucial for healing. It reduces inflammation, and it even triggers cell migration. It's basically calling healing cells over to a damaged area and saying, hey, come do some work over here. If you happen to be a rat in a laboratory, this stuff looks like absolute magic.
And this brilliantly illustrates our massive plot twist. Because while the lab data shows these robust, super exciting results with incredible tissue regeneration in cell cultures in mice, the human data shows absolutely nothing. Seriously, there are zero well-done human clinical trials proving that injecting BPC-157 works or that it does anything beneficial for human injuries. The sheer gap between the rat success and the actual human evidence is staggering.
Actually, scratch that. Let's look at a very specific number to put this in perspective. 12. That is the grand total of people who participated in what was a highly flawed, incredibly tiny human trial regarding arthritic knees. They literally injected BPC-157 into the knees of just 12 people. And out of those 12, only 7 of them reported feeling marginally better compared to a saline injection. That is essentially the entire extent of the human data. There's no long-term safety data, no massive clinical trials proving efficacy, just a tiny, highly insignificant sample size. Which brings up, a pretty huge logical question. Our bodies are incredibly smart. They pull off biological miracles of healing every single day. If BPC-157, this compound that naturally lives in our stomachs, was universally capable of healing torn tendons or worn-out shoulders, don't you think our bodies would naturally just route it there? Yet researchers have never taken a tissue sample from an injured human shoulder or a busted knee and naturally found BPC-157 rushing in to save the day.
So you're probably wondering, if it's completely unproven in humans, how on earth are people just buying it online and injecting it into their arms and legs? Well, it all comes down to a massive legal loophole. The magic phrase, for research purposes only. By slapping those exact words on a little glass vial, online sellers completely bypass regulations. It's totally illegal to sell it for clinical use in humans, but by pretending you, the buyer, are just a laboratory researcher, they can legally ship this stuff right to your front door.
And make absolutely no mistake about where this stuff stands legally and regulatorily. BPC-157 is strictly not approved for use in humans by the FDA. It is not approved by Health Canada. And on top of that, the World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, has explicitly put it on their banned substance list for athletic performance. What's wild is that for a lot of biohackers looking for that illicit edge, the WADA ban actually acts as reverse psychology. They see it's banned and immediately think, well, if they banned it, no way, it must really work. So instead of big pharma, what we are actually dealing with here is the big black market. It is entirely unregulated, unproven, and highly profitable. Online sellers can basically claim it does whatever they want it to do because they don't actually have to prove a single thing. And even worse, there is zero regulatory body checking if the liquid in that vial is actually what the label says it is. And this introduces some very real, very serious hidden dangers. Remember, people aren't just swallowing a pill here. They're actively taking an unregulated liquid and injecting it directly into their problem areas, straight into a sore rotator cuff or a stiff knee. You're running the risk of unsterile vials, you face major contamination risks, you could cause localized tissue damage or spark a rip-roaring infection right at the injection site. And because we have no clinical trials, the long-term complications of putting this into your bodily tissues, they are entirely unknown. Okay, so the crucial point is, let's imagine for a second you get a perfectly clean, uncontaminated vial. And let's say it actually does dramatically accelerate tissue and blood vessel growth in your shoulder, just like it does in the rats. Well, the dark flip side of artificially accelerated tissue growth is carcinogenesis. That is literally what cancer is. Tissue growing incredibly fast and completely out of control, fueled by new blood vessels. If you introduce an agent that artificially forces rapid cell proliferation, you absolutely have to ask if it could also fuel cancer years down the line. We aren't fear-mongering or smart-mongering.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. But wait, my buddy took it and he absolutely swears his shoulder feels incredible. Right. Well, let's talk about the number 30%. That is the standard baseline for the placebo effect. Even if you injected your friend with plain salt water, there was a 30% chance, and honestly, it's likely much higher in the hyped-up echo chamber world of social media, that they will genuinely believe it helped them. You are going off rumors and TikTok videos, heavily influenced by people desperately wanting their expensive biohack to work.
But look, the good news here is that you do not need to turn to the black market to heal. If you're dealing with a nagging injury, look into proven emerging treatments like PRP, platelet-rich plasma, which actually has real growing clinical evidence for soft tissue healing. Put in the hard work with a physiotherapist, utilize targeted anti-inflammatories, and please don't underestimate the sheer power of actual rest. Stick with the things that are scientifically proven. Ultimately, there is just no such thing as a free lunch when it comes to biology. You cannot simply hack your way through tissue recovery without risking massive consequences. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought to deeply reconsider the hype. Will you trust your body's incredibly smart, scientifically proven recovery processes, or are you truly willing to risk your long-term health on an unregulated, unproven vial you bought off the internet? The choice is entirely yours, but the science is crystal clear. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep asking the right questions.